Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. Today we're diving right in between the Burton Step On systems and the Clicker XHB Step In systems. There's very few reviews out there that really go over the K2 clicker system, and especially this updated one. Once you finally step into these bindings, it feels very locked in, right? And I'll give you an example here, right? So when you click onto these, what I really enjoy is the toe and heel engagement, right? So it is not moving. This thing is really locked in. I really was surprised about how locked in this feeling is. Yet, the left or right, there's a very natural, traditional style binding feel where your heel is still locked in from the bottom, but the top of the boot is giving you some minor, very minor lateral movement. One of the other videos that I saw report on this saw this as a negative, which I completely disagree. After riding this for over a season now, what's really interesting is that it actually loads up very well. Yet where I want it to be locked in, which is the toe to heel action, right? When you're pushing on those cars and you're really loading it up and you're doing the fast, big sweeping carves and then changing direction into the smaller, shorter carves, the quick carving type movements. It is very responsive. Right? So as you're kind of buttering or you're moving and carving and leading with your knees, right? And you're opening up your shoulders, you can really feel this kind of natural progression and load up that's happening. So when paired, this system when paired with a good boot, and I of course prefer this kind of 6 to 8 stiffness category on my boots because I really put down some carves. I really enjoy this Clicker XHB system. Okay, now I want to demonstrate how you get into these, right? So, like I said, you first go in to the front, right, where your toes are. Then you activate the rear or where the heels are. You push down, and then you just flip this into the locking position, and then you're in, right? As long as you flip down on that locking position lever, you're in. Never an issue. Same thing with the rear. Just get the toe in first, and then lock in with the heel, and it snaps. In theory, you could just go, but for extra ease of mind, you can just flip that, and you're good to go, right? So no issues at all. That works. Then to get out, you flip the lock lever, and you pull it up. Then the difference here, you have to kick your toes towards your heel to pop it out, right? So that just takes a little bit of getting to know how the system works, but it's very easy once you know it, just like I have. Same now with the front. You just flip this lever, open position, unlocked, right? Then you lift your heel, then you push your toe towards your heel, and then pop out, right? And that's it. It's very simple, very quick. Not at all a topic, but again, it's different than how the Burton Step On systems work with this Clicker XHB systems. Once they're finally in there, it works very well. Once you get used to this motion, it works very well. Then you see it with the many years, people on the forums or out there in the internet, they're always talking about, oh, I've been riding this system for 10, 15 years. There, versions of this. People really are strong advocates for this system, for the ones who are really into it. I mean, they're talking about refreshing their boots and sending it off to repairs because they love this system. So there's definitely some strong K2 clicker advocates out there that won't give these ones up, and I can understand why. So in the bottom of the boots is where the activation happens, right? This is why this is so responsive from toe to heel. You can see these cleats are metal, right? And from the binding standpoint, the connection points as well is metal, right? These are metal connections. So for the most part, the front activation is very simple to do, right? This hook just goes into the hook on the binding itself. And then the trickier part will be the rear entry, right? Which is this hook. And normally, 90% of the time, you just stomp down, this lever activates, and that's how you know you're in. And you just flip this one closed. It's that extra sense that, oh, I'm really locked in there. This isn't in the first or second kind of click, like the Burton Step Ons. This is really a kind of visual and sensation that you know you're fully locked in, right? And then to unlock it, of course, you just flip the lock and then flip up. So I've had this system, of course, in powder situations as well. That's not how I want to categorize that this is not a powder binding at all. That's not at all what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that when you're having a lot of, I would say, packed snow, it doesn't really happen to me in the front. It happens towards the rear of the binding lock. Normally, you can just push on it, snow clears, no issue. But when you're in those conditions where I would say ice is starting to form, that's where I believe you have to pay more particular attention in the rear activation of the clicker binding. K2 provides a stomp pad, right, that kind of gets in here, and then you can just push on it and it helps clear the boot. And by nature, that also helps, of course, have a stronger activation in the heel of the clicker system. But, one time, I was, out of all the days, I would say 10, 15 riding days, I had one day where this kind of ice formation was happening. So what did I do? I went to my truck and, of course, got some WD-40, just made sure to articulate the locking mechanism and lubricate this area, right, and de-ice it. After that, it worked phenomenally. I didn't have an issue. But I do want to mention it. Both bindings have actually a 3-degree cant, right? So it's canted. The bindings also have, the high backs have a adjustment on it, right? So you can adjust the high back for high back lean. There's 2 settings. It's toolless, and you can literally just spin the screws, and you can effectively change the high back angle and front lean by changing just the orientation by 180 degrees. There is also some dampening underneath the binding itself, and then on top there's also dampening on the binding that encompasses the entire footbed of the binding, which gives a nice feel because it is a very direct and very, I would say, precise binding. Activation levers for release and locking. Yeah, I mean, this is built well. Again, if for some reason the rear entry is not completely locked in, you cannot twist these locking mechanisms in, right? So it's a good indication that you're not fully locked in, and maybe just to stomp harder so that you can twist these. Another quarter second versus the step-on, but it's something I didn't mind at all when I was out there riding. What I really like about the feel of this entire clicker setup is actually not only how it felt under the foot, but really as I'm progressively pushing it and getting used to the system, it really never hit its limit in the sense of feeling like it just kind of changed in its character. It's always very direct. The precision that I'm feeling from toe to heel is always there. I love this kind of lateral flexibility, so I can drive the carve with my knees. I can be playful, hit some jumps, moguls and so forth without any issues, side hits. So on the heel cup of this binding, there's a visual sense that when you're locked in, there needs to be space between the heel cup of the binding and the boot in order to articulate out of the binding, right? So when you adjust this heel cup all the way against the binding and the boot, together, that there's no space, I could not get this boot out of the binding. So that's why it's there. With that additional space, right? That additional space that this is requiring, right? And when you're starting to throw those Euro carves down, then you try to manage the overhang on these extreme lean angles. So to a point where you really have to do your measurements. You have to try your boot out and try to balance the boot into your board. So you gotta get your bindings, you gotta get your boots and your board to test fit everything out and make sure that it's working for you. Really enjoyed this one, throwing down some cars, some lean ankles. I think what's particularly interesting is that the locking points is in the bottom of the binding, and it's not on the high back like the Burton Step On. It's actually in the heel, right? Those are the major 2 points. I never felt like this would kind of pop out or had any of those kind of issues, thinking that 2 is not enough. Clicker really, hit the ball out of the park with this one. This one is just such a fun system to work with. But I will say it is not as easy as the Burton Step On system from an entry and exit standpoint. But there are benefits of this, and I would say for the people who are really, just K2 fans, right? They love the K2 system. It is K2 boot specific, or someone who has traditional bindings, right? But you can use it with a traditional binding and then hop on to your board with these bindings. So it's very nice. And I'll do a specific review just on this system without the compare and contrast to really dive into those other details. But yeah, this is again a very welcome setup. And now I'm here with the Burton Step On system. This one's the Genesis, right? It has this, I would say, hammock system that goes around the boot, right? The heel and high back of the boot. And yeah, so from this perspective, completely different than the K2 system. You're still top entry, right? But the mounting points is different. Instead of having just 2 in the bottom of the binding, this one is set up a little bit differently. The first mounting point I want to go over is the heel, right? The heel cup has the mounting point in particular for the rear of the boot, right? So it's right here. This one is a 2-step action. There's 2 clicks. If there's a lot of powder, you could just get 1, 2, right? Or sometimes you get 1 in there, but as you're riding, the second one clicks in. But again, 90–95% of the time, absolutely no issue getting the 2 clicks. It's, for me at least, much easier to get on, much more intuitive to get on there, and very simple, right? So you just make sure that the heel is in, where that connection point is, and then up front, there's 2, right? On each sides of the toes, you're having these 2 connection points that articulate in, right? So you push down on it, and you hear that snap, right? So once you're in there, you're not moving. I was talking about this kind of articulation that's natural to the K2 system, that's matching more of a normal traditional binding. From this standpoint, this is also having a much more locked in heel, right? So once the heel is fully locked in, the front is fully locked in, this is not going anywhere, right? This is really much more tighter, I would say, laterally than the K2 system. Some people actually mention it, right? That it might be a little bit too tight. So when you're looking for the Burton Step On bindings, it's important to understand which type of high back stiffness that you're preferring, right? So you're having the basic reflex Step On, then you're having the Genesis, then the EST, and then of course the Carbon, the X version. And each one of those have different stiffness levels. So definitely grab the high back, make sure you're good with it, right? The Genesis does have a little bit more flex to it, which I appreciate because I like this kind of progressively harder carves, right? So if that makes any sense, I like to kind of have that progression, that it's not always just immediate, like 100%, 100%. I want to be able to work between 60 and 90%, right, in pressure application, but still have that engagement, right, which the step-on system is very, very well known for. The toe to heel edge, again, is very direct, right? I would say very direct compared to a traditional binding. But when compared to the K2 system would probably be at a level 10, right? And this is, again, depending on your binding setup and so forth, in that 8 to 9 territory as far as toe to heel edge connection. Again, I love that, right? So I love that, especially when I'm throwing down those carves, and I'm really enjoying how this whole ecosystem works with the 3 points of connection. Now, with the Burton Step On systems, it's very, very simple to get in. You just have to watch your rear connection point here and make sure that it hooks into the heel connection point here, right? So it's very simple. It's a 2-click action. You first just put it into the back, right? So now the heel is connected. Then you push into your toes, right? And then both the 2 connection points in the front connect. Just make sure you're fully clicked in, right? Just gonna step into your heel and you're fully connected. So again, it's very simple, very easy, and yeah, there's no additional kind of lever that needs to get clicked in and locked in like the K2 system. This is very simple. Now I'm going to do the rear, so I'm just going to mind the heel. Once I'm in there, then the toes, and I'm in, right? So no drama, no fuss. I'm sure you've seen it with other YouTube videos, but it's very, very simple. So, but yeah, again, and then to click out, right? So here, the levers are not on the inside like the clicker system. It's on the outside of the binding, right? And you just have to, for instance, on the outside of the binding here, you have the lever. You pull that up, pull out with the heel, and then twist with your toes. So this is the, if anything would be an issue, this is what you see being talked about online, right? Is this kind of toe disengagement. And same thing for the front foot, right? So you just lift the heel out and then twist the toe out of the way, and then you're out, right? Over time, of course, you get better with it, and it's becomes more natural. It's really second nature once you're in there. And I would say kind of getting your heel in and then the toe is much more natural versus the clicker. I would say it's much more forgiving in the sense of you don't have to be as precise in your clicking on, right, and kind of clicking off. You can be a little bit more loose. One thing to notice, of course, is misuse, right? So it's important that you use this kind of clip here on the boot heel to put your snow pants underneath this, right? Because you don't want snow pants covering this heel activation point, this heel locking point. If you do, it's either going to be very difficult to get out, and of course the horror stories that you're seeing on Instagram where people are having to cut out their pants. I really hesitate even mentioning it because it's really misuse and people just not understanding or reading the instructions. And I know these are replaceable, right? So, as these time, whether tensile strength or, they snap, you can get these and replace these, right? These activation points here, these locking points in the toe, are also a point of not only wear and tear, but over a long period of time, you can also replace these, right? That is a serviceable part. Now, I really enjoy what Burton did with the Burton EST, the Genesis EST bindings that they released, where they redesigned these front clipping points where there's a Phillips head that you can actually just unscrew and then replace these, right? That's super cool. Versus these where you have to really take the binding apart and start replacing these in case that does wear out or get loose. A perfect example, of course, I would say extreme use case example is rental equipment. I was recently in Niseko in Japan, and when I was there, the first set of step-on bindings that I rented, it really didn't fit well. It was actually very loose, and you could see visibly that these clips were completely worn down. And again, that's I would say, extreme use case scenario where people are just going through at different skill levels. Hands down, great job on Burton to have this kind of serviceable part. Serviceability, of course, is one of those things that is a lost art. I've even seen some companies go as far as do aftermarket parts on this, right? Kind of locking on this heel cup with additional parts just to make sure this kind of movement is eliminated, right? So for those really ultra precise carves, and I've seen also aftermarket parts on these parts itself here, and even people not only moving the actual lifting release points from the outside of the boots to the inside of the boots. Those videos are out there, right? But what's also super cool is that people are really having some innovation in mind and even running different straps and so forth to try to have a higher point of release for the bindings to improve the ease of use of this. Like anything aftermarket, right, it's happening in cars, motorcycles, and so forth. These are very popular, right? So I'm not surprised that people are already modding these bindings. And from a boot perspective, yeah, so the photons, I'm very happy with these. Again, the extreme use case scenario of rentals, I don't think reflect what these bindings really can do, right? Because if you get a bad set of boots, it can completely change the experience. But I would say for both the Burton setup and the K2 setup, finding the right type of boots for you will make or break it, right? So some people even, whether they're on the fence, right, they look at the boots, right, to see what feels better for their foot, especially from not just the shape, but a stiffness standpoint, from a comfort standpoint, stiffness standpoint, and tech standpoint, are looking for. So as long as you're having that in mind, you have both options, and the Burton having, of course, not only the Burton boot, there's DC, there's other brands that are starting to do a boot specific for the step-on system, and also bindings, right? Like Union is now coming out with their own step-on bindings as well, and there's that kind of proprietary setup now being shared with other OEM options for sure with Burton, either from a step-on system or the boot system, have more. You cannot go wrong with both systems. I know this is kind of like a head-to-head or a battle between these step-in and step-on systems that are top entry. You can't go wrong. I really enjoyed both seasons now with both setups, and there's definitely plus and minuses with each system that I try to highlight today, and I hope this really helped you with your decision making. If you have any questions, of course, subscribe to the channel and get onto the comments. I'd really like to continue the conversation. If you're a hard carver, response is really critical for you, and you want the very kind of direct and stiff boot setup, I would recommend the K2 Clicker XHB system. It is a little bit learning from a entry and exit standpoint, but a lot of those hard carvers, they're focused technically on their equipment, and they really enjoy this kind of feeling, this direct feeling. I enjoyed it, and I'm sure you would too if you're one of these people. Now, the Burton Step On system, it just, because of the more boot options, because of the more binding options, there's just a wider array of people that can really enjoy it, right? So everyone from the freestyle lover, to a free ride, free carver, and the hard carver, right? I mean, you even see, people out there like Fawcett enjoying the Burton Step-On system. So, in that standpoint, the Burton's does not lack in performance, right? It still has that type of performance as well, and the range and flexibility of options is fun, right? So I've been riding all season now with the K2 Clicker XHBs, and then coming off of Niseko and hiking all the way up to the top of Annapurna, I started playing around this season also with the Burton Step Ons, and so I'm going to keep the Step Ons for now, right? I definitely have more miles on the K2 clickers, and I want to start just reviewing and comparing and contrasting the different range of options that Burton Step Ons offer. I hope you really enjoyed this content, and if you liked the video, you liked the content, definitely subscribe to the channel, thumbs up from the video, and until next time, ride safe out there.